further, I will also give a couple of remarks about ECDPM and introduce our organization to people that may not know us so well. So ECDPM is a think tank that is based in the Netherlands in Maastricht and also has an office in Brussels in Belgium. We've been around for roughly 30 years and actually over 30 years. And we focus largely on Europe-Africa relations, producing research and policy advice on a variety of different topics, from climate change to digital transition, governance, and of course, human development. My name is Katja Sergeyev. I am a policy officer at ECDPM, and I focus on European foreign and development policy, and of course working on many different thematic areas, including health and education. Recently, ECDPM published a report on human development, focusing particularly on 3 partner countries, namely Guinea, and Zambia. Human development is one of the key areas of EU's international cooperation and is also an important area of EU's added value. The research report pointed out that EU support to human development sectors is appreciated and it's essential to bolster EU's standing as a key partner. However, at the same time, the geopolitical context is changing rapidly and it's characterized by multiple overlapping crises, from the war in Ukraine to climate crisis. So our essential question today is about keeping human development in the agenda amidst this global context. We have a mix of people and different perspectives that work on different areas of human development, and we aim at bringing them all together during this event. So in practice, what is going to happen is that we are first going to give a brief presentation on the human development paper that we produced earlier this year. The presentation is going to be given by my colleague Enato Domingo, that has also been one of the co-authors of the report. After that, we are going to move to the panel discussion. So each panelist will get a turn of a few minutes, and that will be followed by each discussant. There is a chat open all the time for your questions and remarks, so feel free to use that opportunity. Feel free to also present yourself at the chat, given your name and organization, so we can see the variety of people and organizations in the audience. So without further ado, I'm going to move to Enatu's presentation. So Enatu is our policy officer at ECDPM. Her focus has been on digital transition as well as EU's foreign and development policy. And as I mentioned, she is one of the co-authors of the report. So Enatu, please do take the floor.
Thank you, Katja. I'm gonna try to share my presentation in a minute. Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the discussion. So as my colleague has mentioned, I will be sharing key findings of our recent report, the EU Geopolitics and Human Development, Insights from Zambia, Kenya, and Guinea. We published this report in May. And so to give you a bit of context, we published an initial report where we looked how human development was addressed in the NDK programming, and we looked at sub-Saharan multi-annual indicative programs, and we found that 90% of the MIPs do include human development as a key priority, and most of them have education as one of the key human development sectors. And so this really reflects that human development has been back on the EU agenda, mostly thanks to the momentum brought by the COVID pandemic, which has highlighted the need and the growing interest on human development in both Europe and in partner countries. However, as my colleague has mentioned as well, there is a growing focus on geopolitics, especially as the geopolitical competition is deepening. And I think A reflection of that is the new EU Global Gateway Initiative, which has a strong focus on investment in infrastructure. And thematically, we also saw that green and digital transitions are high in the agenda. However, in this second report, we wanted to understand how do stakeholders in Guinea, Kenya, and Zambia perceive the EU's offer in human development sectors, and what do they see as the key challenges. And so to conduct this work, we did have the chance to speak with more than 50 representatives from civil society organizations, EU delegations in those three countries, EU member states, but also to contextualize with the work that other development partners are doing in those countries. And so I think, as we know, the human development is a broad concept, but I think something that influenced our selection of countries is the uniqueness of the list of priorities and how the EU has been able to position itself strategically in the human development sector in those three contexts. And so I think personally one of the most important findings of the report is that the EU support to human development is necessary and highly aligned with the needs in partner countries. And so for that, it's appreciated by the government, by the civil society, but also the private sector. And so I think something that is also very positive is that the EU's recent policy changes have had also very positive impact on how the EU engages with partner countries, especially as it aims to become a more geopolitical and strategic actor. And I think in this programming cycle, for instance, the EU has been perceived as being more active in engaging with key stakeholders in working in human development, but also being able to integrate some of the key interests and priorities of partner countries. And so in a way, it's true that in the Brussels, the geopolitical positioning and the rhetoric around it has been very prevalent, but the geopolitical rhetoric doesn't really mean much for local actors who are focused on the immediate human demand needs, and also whether the EU is able to deliver on some of the initiatives that has put out. And so it's important, the conclusion of this report, I guess, it's to remind that the geopolitical relevance of human development should not be undermined, as this is the EU's area of strength. And therefore, in the longer term, that can help the EU position itself in the geopolitical scene. And to give you an example, which I think it's important to understand how the EU has been putting its position itself strategically in those countries, I want to give just 3 examples. One of them is in Zambia. The EU has a strong focus on early childhood education and development, although its approach to human development is very broad, combining nutrition, education, water. But the fact that it has recently focused on early childhood education makes it very strategic, because this is an area that has not had very much attention from the donor community until now. In Kenya, it's a very different context. Kenya is a low middle income country. It's by its own digital hub, and also it's geopolitically very relevant for the EU. And so the focus has been on twin digital and green transitions. However, the need for support for traditional human development it's very high, especially to address poverty and also inequality. And so what we see is that, of course, there is a human-centric digitalization which prioritizes education. There is still for support to human development. And finally, I wanted also to give an example of the work that the EUD in Kenya is doing. The EUD has, for the first time, stepped in the education sector. It has been able to do that through the work that France is doing in partnership with the Global Fund. The focus is, of course, on Tibet, but it's also able to address some of the gaps in primary education. And so we did provide many recommendations for the EU to strengthen the partnerships around human development. I will only highlight 3 of them because I think reading the report will give more nuance to some of the points I make here. And so first of all, to leverage political momentum for better human development. And this in practice means identifying and supporting change agents in governments. So for example, Zambia and Kenya have new governments who have made commitments to increase budget for some of the human development sectors. And so leveraging that will be important moving forward. And also I would like to highlight the importance of coordination between various team members at the EUD, the EU delegations. I know that many of them have built capacity on new topics such as digitalization, but coordination within teams and also sectors will be essential to implement a multi-sectoral approach or initiatives such as the One Health approach. And finally, just the EU has done much progress in collaborating with local actors, but we think that there is still space for more partnership with local actors, especially at the conceptualization phase of projects. And finally, I think speaking about how the EU can communicate its offer and how to position itself as the key relevant human development actor, it's important that initiatives such as the Global Gateway communicate clearly how the initiative can respond to human development needs and what is the added value of the EU in partner countries. And so this, I think, in practice means that development policy objectives need to also be integrated in the communication of the Global Gateway. Something that we found interesting is that looking at the Global Gateway flagship initiatives for 2023, we saw that only 11% of the projects, of a total of 80 projects, only cover human development. And so that is kind of expresses the share or the balance that we see now and that we would like to see improved moving forward. And so I leave it here. And for my colleague to give you the guiding questions for today's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Enatu. That was very useful and really set the scene. We are now moving directly to the panelists. And as a first, there is going to be floor given to Ms. Erika Gerritsen. She is a director in Human Development, Migration, Governance and Peace in DG International Partnerships, also more familiarly known as DG INTPA in the European Commission. She has been working in the European Commission since 1995. And in her quite impressive history at the Commission, she has been, for instance, posted in EU delegations in Slovenia prior to accession and also in Benin. She has been working at the EU Commission Director General in charge of International Development Cooperation, the former DG DevCo, since 2003, mostly on Africa. She has also been heading several units that work on different topics such as Central African region, public support, public finance management, and of course macroeconomic analysis, fiscal policies, etc. In 2021, she was the acting director for newly established directorate in charge of sustainable finance, jobs, growth, and economy that works for people for DG INTPA. And now I'm going to give floor to her, and I'm kindly requesting you to stick to the 7-minute deadline. Thank you.
Thanks, Katja, for this introduction and Enatu for the summary of the report. It's really a pleasure for me to be here indeed as a newly appointed director for human development in DG INTPA. So your study and the findings that go with them are particularly timely for me in this new position and in finding about the findings of your own research, especially in the 3 countries on which you have been working. And obviously the the first conclusion that you have come to is a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure to see and to hear that the finding that you made is that we as European Union, European Commission are a relatively appreciated actor when it comes to human development in the partner countries where we work, and there are probably reasons for that go to the history of the way we engage in partner countries, especially when working on human development. We have been active in these sectors for several decades, accompanying countries and having also brought a lot of experience to us and with us in this dialogue and in this partnership in the sectors of health and education in particular, and now moving more and more in the sector of social protection. So indeed, human development is a priority for the EU in the current context. It is a priority, as you rightly said, because of the momentum created by COVID, but also because of the political leadership of our commissioner, who has strongly personally engaged and committed to increase the financing that we from DG INTPA provide to the education sector, establishing a target of 10% of the funding managed by this Director General dedicated to education. And wider than this, as you know, the NDP, so that our financial instrument, financial package, has a specific target and spending target set for human development, which is that 20% of our funding should go to human development activities. So this is to say that human development is indeed a clear priority of our work. As you found out, it's also present in most of the multi-annual indicative programs that we are currently implementing around the world. We have several tools for implementing these various programs. But what I would like to say is that at this moment in time, and when we are in this sort of a multiple crisis context, where different and a lot of priorities are becoming very vocal, it's important not to lose track of the priorities. What I found out recently is that on human development aspects like health, for example, the figures around health and maternal health and child health, mortality rates of children have decreased substantially since the 2000s, so in the 20 last years. And this is clearly thanks to the international agenda putting clear targets for this purpose. But what is also clear is that, and was found, is that these targets have been met, or the figures have evolved in a much stronger manner during the MDGs time, so that's the 15 first years of this century, than in the SDG time, meaning that in a way the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, were really specifically targeting more specifically health and education, and this has been a very strong driver to making very clear progress in these areas, and this is less the case now. So there is also here source for reflection for the next phase. But the EU is indeed continuing focusing on health education as well as social protection. We are currently adopting the global health strategy, where we are indeed building on this COVID experience. We are providing support in many countries around the world. In the education sector, we are working on the one hand with global tools like the Global Partnership for Education, but also investing nationally. And that's where I want to come at, which is the fact that when we engage in a sector like health, education, social protection, we indeed work with our delegations in the countries who themselves engage in the policy dialogue with the partner countries, with the civil society organizations, the local authorities, depending on the country context and the way we implement our aid. And one of the important dimensions of the way we are engaging is that indeed we are fully aligned with the national policies. And this alignment to the national policies remains, to me, at the core of how we can be efficient, respectful of the national policies, and therefore responding to the needs of the countries, which are obviously best known by the country itself. And by doing this, what we are doing is also working with a modality which is not currently in use in most of the countries that you have been looking at. But when we are working with budget support, which I think we are somehow mentioning shortly in the report, when we work through budget support, we are aligning even more to the national policies because we are putting our money into the national budget. But by doing so, we are also looking at public finance management and therefore also contributing to reducing corruption. And I think that this feature about corruption being an important aspect of human development was also present in your report. Now, as we are indeed moving to the Global Gateway strategy, which, as you put it, is the geopolitical strategy that we are engaging now into, I appreciate the fact that you have identified the human development projects under the first list of Global Gateway projects. It's true that the Global Gateway for now, I mean, is really focusing on building infrastructure, but also the overall environment around infrastructure. So it means that even if there are identified projects in health actually, which are only 11%, there is a lot of training and education dimensions that go together with other all the other Global Gateway projects that are on the list, because whichever the sector you invest in, be it mobility, digital connectivity, energy production, environment, biodiversity, you need to create the skills, you need to have educated people, and that goes along together with the Global Gateway objective. So in this sense, there is no modification in our engagement in this human development agenda, and we will continue working along these lines in the future. Then you made the points about the working together with local authorities as well as civil society organizations. Clearly, this is for us a strong dimension of our work. We work systematically in all our the countries where we are present. We have these civil society roadmaps, which means that we have this partnership with civil society organizations whereby we consult in order to make sure that the whole of the society is engaged in the policies, but also working with or through civil society organizations, and if need be, local authorities, whenever this makes more sense for a specific activity. And in this sense, I think we are also therefore listening more to the national needs, to the local needs of the people. The last point is about the Team Europe dimension, and I also note in the report that you are making comments about, I mean, or analyzing the impact of the Team Europe approach. Obviously, this alignment to the national policies needs to be made together with the member states. Team Europe is getting stronger at country level, but at the end of the day, to me, what is really important for development effectiveness is to have strong national policies, strong leadership of those national policies by the national actors. And in my experience, whenever there is a context like this where the national government is strong and is owning its policy and is coordinating with the actors and the donors around such a policy, this is the best way for us to have, or for the country to implement their own strategies in the most efficient and faster manner. So that's really from me a few remarks from the report, and again, thanks for the findings. It's really interesting the way you looked at this geopolitical dimension of the human development in our cooperation. So thank you. I hope I didn't spend too much time and ran over too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gerritsen. That was very interesting, and I particularly paid attention to what you said about the global health strategy and what you said about how human development also fits to Global Gateway and how it is basically let's say, the underlying values in there in Global Gateway strategy as well. So I found this very interesting, and I hope in the Q&A we have an opportunity to go a bit more into detail as well. Next, we have Mr. Khalil Traore. He is a technical assistant to the Secretary General of the Ministry of Technical Education, Vocational Training and Employment in Guinea. Previously, he has been in charge of planning and monitoring and evaluation in the ministry's Strategy and Development Office. He is a researcher in communication for development, and he's a specialist in international project management and communication. So I'm going to give the floor to you now, Mr. Traore, and I also hope that you will keep your intervention in 7 minutes. Thank you.
D'accord, merci madame, merci à tout le monde, et merci pour l'organisation de cet événement qui aide le monde, parce que le développement humain, c'est la première source. Donc, je voudrais articuler mon intervention autour de 6 points, notamment la politique éducative en Guinée, le ministère de l'enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle que je représente dans cette rencontre, nos centres de formation et nos centres de perfectionnement. Ensuite, comment nous affrontons nos challenges. Au 4e point, nous aurons nos priorités et ensuite nos attentes face à l'Union européenne et la place de l'Union européenne dans le développement humain, situation, enseignement technique et enfin la portée du soutien de l'Union européenne dans le développement humain en Guinée. Donc, je voudrais commencer par dire que la Guinée a 3 ministères qui s'occupent de l'éducation et de la formation. Il y a 6 programmes. Mais avant ça, il y a le programme décennal de l'éducation. Le programme décennal de l'éducation qui est le PRODEG. Le PRODEG développe en son sein 6 sous-programmes. Il y a l'accès équitable à l'enseignement général, la qualité et la pertinence des enseignements, l'alphabétisation et l'éducation des adultes, l'expansion et la réforme de l'enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle et de l'emploi, la réforme de l'enseignement supérieur et de la recherche scientifique, ensuite la gouvernance et le pilotage du système. Donc ça, c'est un peu l'ensemble des objectifs globaux que le pays se donne en termes de développement humain. Maintenant, nous revenons au niveau de notre ministère, le ministère de l'enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle et de l'emploi, qui a pour mission de mettre en œuvre le sous-programme 4. Le sous-programme 4, c'est l'expansion et la réforme de l'enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle et de l'emploi. OK? Mais avant, avec les autres ministères, nous partageons ensemble le sous-programme 2, qui est la qualité et la pertinence des enseignements. Donc, à notre niveau, au niveau du ministère de l'enseignement technique, pour atteindre nos objectifs, nous avons des centres de formation professionnelle, nous avons des centres de formation d'apprentissage post-primaire et post-secondaire, nous avons des centres spécialisés en formation. Donc, au terme de nombre de centres, nous avons environ 173 centres de formation professionnelle en Guinée qui développent 120 filières de formation privées comme publiques. Donc ici, c'est le ministère de l'enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle et de l'emploi qui coordonne toutes les activités des écoles techniques de formation privées et publiques. Donc, il y a 120 filières, je l'ai cité. Maintenant, au-delà de ces centres de formation, nous avons des centres de perfectionnement. Il y a par exemple le Centre national de perfectionnement à la gestion qui est le CNPG, qui d'ailleurs est devenu une grande machine de développement humain en Guinée. Et pour l'année 2022, il y a eu plus de 300 formations qui ont été déroulées. Et nous avons eu dans ce sens le soutien de ce team international du Canada et d'autres cabinets à renommée internationale qui appuient donc le ministère de l'enseignement technique dans l'objectif dans l'atteinte de ces objectifs dans ce sens. Il y a également un centre, une direction que nous appelons le perfectionnement, le perfectionnement professionnel. Voilà ce centre qui s'occupe des personnes en situation de travail, hein, qui s'occupe des personnes qui n'ont pas été à l'école et qui s'occupe des ONG, des groupements agro-pastoraux et ainsi de suite. Donc, cette direction permet à la Guinée d'avoir euh, une grande panoplie alors de personnes en activité qui sont prises en charge par le perfectionnement. Et de là, je reviens sur comment nous affrontons tout ça. Et au niveau du ministère de l'Enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle et de l'emploi, nous bénéficions grandement du budget national pour l'atteinte de nos objectifs. Mais auprès du budget national, nous avons beaucoup de partenaires, des partenaires techniques et financiers, que je ne voudrais pas citer ici, qui nous appuient dans ce sens sur le plan technique et sur le plan financier. Donc, ces partenaires techniques et financiers aujourd'hui sont en train de dérouler sur le plan technique, nous appuient pour la formulation de nos programmes, nous appuient pour le développement de nos centres, mais aussi le développement de nos programmes, mais aussi avec les moyens financiers. Actuellement, avec l'AFD, nous avons 14 assistants techniques. Les assistants techniques, ce sont des experts qui ont été recrutés pour accompagner l'éducation et la formation en Guinée. Donc, ils sont au niveau de Conakry, mais aussi au niveau des régions. Donc, il y a les assistants techniques qui sont basés dans les régions qui accompagnent notre système, les trois systèmes, c'est-à-dire l'enseignement supérieur, l'enseignement professionnel et l'enseignement primaire. Je voudrais revenir aujourd'hui sur nos priorités. Vous savez, nous sommes en situation de transition. Le président de la République est en train de prôner la refondation. Donc, il y a assez de priorités, mais il y a moins de moyens. Donc, ces priorités aujourd'hui au niveau de l'enseignement technique, c'est de réussir la transition formation et emploi. Et à notre niveau, il y a moins d'outils qui travaillent sur la transition formation et emploi, ce qui est un grand déficit pour nous. Donc, les jeunes finissent la formation et après, ils sont dans la rue, ils peuvent vaquer à autre chose. Donc, je vous donne un seul exemple. Nous avons des écoles nationales d'agriculture et d'élevage qui sont en principe des grandes machines de développement. Mais les jeunes, après des formations dans ces écoles d'agriculture et d'élevage, puisqu'ils n'ont pas de moyens pour aller faire leurs champs, ils sont obligés de faire les taxis-motos, de faire les petits travaux de réparation de téléphones et autres. C'est qu'il y a une grande perte pour la nation. Au lieu que ces écoles nationales d'agriculture et d'élevage soient vraiment des machines de développement, aujourd'hui, c'est le contraire. Donc, nous avons effectivement besoin des appuis dans ce sens. Nous avons également comme priorité aujourd'hui la construction et l'équipement des lycées techniques. Vous comprendrez que la transition n'est pas tellement bonne parce qu'on quitte directement l'enseignement fondamental, on vient dans les écoles techniques, ce qui crée assez de problèmes, et en ce sens que quand nos lauréats quittent la Guinée pour les écoles techniques de type occidental, ils ne se retrouvent pas. Donc, il faut réussir ça. Rapidement, il y a aussi le développement des centres de formation d'apprentissage post-primaire et post-primaire et secondaire. Ces centres accueillent les gens qui ont été à l'école et ceux qui n'ont pas été à l'école. Ça, c'est très important pour l'accompagnement de la jeunesse et pour la prise en charge non seulement des gens en situation de handicap, mais aussi ceux hors du système. L'un des grands challenges qu'il faille vraiment noter aujourd'hui, la Guinée, pour le moment, n'a pas de politique pour récupérer les enfants hors du système éducatif. Ça, c'est un grand problème que nous voulons résoudre rapidement. Et également, il y a le préscolaire. Nous sommes en train de développer notre école, notre formation préscolaire, mais il y a moins de moyens, il n'y a pas d'école presque qui s'occupe du préscolaire. On est à la phase expérimentale. Donc, il est question de lever ces challenges. Aujourd'hui, maintenant, notre place, la place de l'Union européenne dans le système enseignement technique et formation professionnelle se résume actuellement à l'intervention du projet Intégra qui est mis en œuvre par la GIZ, l'ENABEL, Terre des Hommes, qui s'articule autour de la formation de plus de 300 jeunes issus des divers horizons, notamment ceux candidats à l'immigration retournés en Guinée. Donc, il y a une collaboration euh, entre notre ministère et l'Union européenne à travers Integra pour la prise en charge de ces jeunes. Donc, nous disposons des centres de formation, nous disposons d'un corps enseignant peut-être adapté à la situation. Mais aujourd'hui, si nous parlons de cette place, nous estimons que cette place n'est pas vraiment la place que nous voulons que l'Union européenne occupe. Nous voulons que l'Union européenne vienne, s'il faut, au premier rang pour s'occuper effectivement du développement humain en Guinée. Vous comprendrez que la Guinée est un pays en chantier et donc nous avons besoin de beaucoup d'efforts pour évoluer, pour nous développer. Donc nous attendons que l'Union européenne occupe à travers des actions directes, c'est-à-dire que ne pas passer par les organismes de mise en œuvre, travaille directement avec le ministère et s'aligner à la politique du ministère en termes d'enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle et de l'emploi. Au-delà d'intégrer, nous ne nous souvenons pas pour le moment qu'il y ait une autre intervention de l'Union européenne en Guinée. Donc, du point de vue attente, c'était ça. Maintenant, qu'est-ce que ça va donner? Vous comprendrez qu'en Guinée, il y a beaucoup d'escolarisés, des gens qui n'ont pas été à l'école, qui ne travaillent pas et qui sont dans la rue. Il faut les récupérer. Il faut récupérer ceux qui ont abandonné les classes. Il faut récupérer rapidement ceux qui n'ont pas été en classe. Il faut récupérer également ceux qui ont abandonné. Donc, en somme, je voudrais me résumer. Je suis un ancien, donc j'ai l'amour de la parole. Donc, pour vous dire que en Guinée, la Guinée a effectivement des outils de développement humain, mais la Guinée est en manque de moyens efficaces pour que vraiment la notion de développement humain, pour que la Guinée se développe, pour que vraiment les jeunes de la Guinée aient une information adéquate. Je vous remercie. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Traore. That was quite interesting take on the Guinean national context, as well as thank you for highlighting the vast challenges that Guinea has in terms of promoting human development and also bringing out the wishes what EU could do more in that context. Now we will delve into the perspectives of Mr. Miselo Valia. Miselo is a researcher at Zambia Institute for Policy Analysis and Research. He has over 9 years of experience in conducting economic and public policy analysis, and as a policy analyst, he has served on various technical committees that have led to development and review of key policies in Zambia. He has served as a member of technical committee to review the 7th National Development Plan of Zambia. He has served as a member of technical committee that developed Zambia's first voluntary national review for the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course a member of technical committee on Cash Plus, which is a variation of Zambia's largest social protection program for the social cash transfer. So Mr. Valia, please take the floor, and for you as well, I would like to remind you to try to stick to the 7 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kacha. I hope you can hear me clearly. Great.
Yes, we can hear
Thank you. So thank you. I think firstly, let me start by giving a bit of a background. As most of you may know, we are recently coming into an election. So less than 2 years ago, we had a new government that was voted in, and that has sort of contributed to the changing landscape in terms of human development in the country, but also the approach in terms of governance and our geopolitics. So firstly, one of the things that we've seen is more commitment from the government towards the social sectors. What we've seen is a significant increase in the allocations towards social sectors. And by social sectors, these basically relate to human development, the health, education, and our social protection. So there's been quite a significant shift there. And obviously, this is on the background or backdrop of huge debt levels that had become unsustainable, and the country has also been in the process of reaching out to the IMF for a facility which was approved, and also looking towards trying to restructure debt to just create more space for spending within the social sectors. This also has led to a sort of a different approach with the new government that has seen the government leaning more towards rebuilding relationships with the West, including the European Union itself, various European countries, as well as the USA. So that's sort of a bit of a shift that we've seen. And so the EU now in Zambia is viewed more and more as a more friendly partner or an ally that can be relied upon. And of course, these changes also provide an opportunity for more support. Now, what we've seen in terms of the EU in the past in Zambia and currently in Zambia is part of the projects around human development have been focused on human rights support. And what we've seen now as the government enters, or the state or the nation enters into the implementation of the 8th National Development Plan, what we've seen is the EU try to align its support to the priorities. And one of these priorities is education. Now, this is quite important when you look at the human development sector in Zambia, because what we noted through studies that we conducted as the Zambia Institute for Policy Analysis and Research is that between 2014 and 2018, the number of children that were out of school was on the increase. This basically meant that quite a number of children were opting out of school, and this could have been related to the economic conditions where households opted to have children out of school and convert them into labor so that they contribute financially to the households, as opposed to having these children in school. Now, that was a really worrying and concerning trend. And what we saw in 2021 as a response from the government was the implementation of free education. So since 2022, the Zambian government, or Zambia, has been implementing free education from primary school, from early childhood education, all the way to secondary school. And now this is very important because part of the EU support in Zambia has been realigned towards education, which is now a priority for the government. Now, when we look at education, the specific focus and support from the EU has been early childhood education. Now, this is one area where a lot of support is required and there's a huge need. Currently, as of 2022-2023, only 30% of children entering grade 1 or the first grade have early childhood education, or have some early childhood education experience, meaning sort of preschool experience. Only 30% of children in Zambia have that sort of experience. Now, this is very important because the average age for entry into the first grade in Zambia is around 7 years. So this means for a number of children, they're basically entering the education system at age 7 without any prior learning or any prior access to any sort of form of teaching. And this obviously has long-term impacts on the educational outcomes, but also the impact on future earnings. And so this is an area that has been identified as quite important. When you look at the facilities as well, this area has been a challenge in terms of having access to these facilities. When you compare our kind of education system, it's sort of blotted at around primary school level. And when you look at your average Zambian in terms of their highest level of educational attainment, it's at around primary school. Now, that means for many Zambians, they only go up to primary school level. And so the response of the free education, so trying to remove and drop all costs that are related to going to school, so any school fees, any other fees that are related, examination fees, any fees that are related to the education, to accessing education at primary and secondary, were dropped as a way of trying to encourage learners to come back into school. In the year 2023, we have seen some improvement. I think enrollment rates increased from around 8 to 12% to, from about 7% to around 13%. So almost doubling in terms of the enrollment rates. So that also has been a positive move. But obviously, when you look at the state of the education system, there's still quite a lot that requires support. Like I said, at early childhood education, there's just not enough facilities around the country. When you look at the number of primary schools we have, for a population of about 18 million total, half of that population is below the age of 17, meaning half of that population is school going. We have around 9,000 primary schools. When you compare that to secondary schools, we just have about 1,000 secondary schools. So for context, that means as a country, we have, for every secondary school, we have 9 primary schools. Now, what that has done for us in the education sector is that it's created a bit of a funnel approach where 9 pupils from 9 schools are competing to get into just one school. And so a lot of children, irrespective of their performance, will not get an opportunity to progress towards secondary school. Now, this will also affect our long-term goals. Zambia has a long-term goal, what is known as a Vision 2030, which is also aligned to the SDGs, where we talk about getting towards a prosperous middle-income country. And so that requires, of course, though it's from the human development sector, but it requires getting into sectors such as manufacturing, sectors that are more productive. And these are sectors already that the EU is supporting. Agriculture, manufacturing, these are sectors that are already being supported. But for us to get to those sectors, we need to have the right skills. What sort of skills do you have that will ensure that you can basically convert the economy from a primary producing economy to sort of an economy that is able to add value? So that then becomes important in the overall goal of achieving our long-term development agenda as a country, but also looking at some of the sustainable development goals, because a lot of them look at basically trying to improve the livelihoods of people, and education is surely one of those areas that really we have challenges in. And so the refocusing for the EU, I think, provides a great opportunity to support our education system, which has been lagging, outside providing outside providing basically access to education. So that is dropping school fees, building more schools. There's also need to improve the quality of the education. One of the areas also that we lag is on the STEMs. So there's not a lot of teachers that are available for that. There's not a lot of material within the schools to support that. And if you link that from the human development to sort of the economic diversification agenda, it then becomes very important to ensure that you have as many learners going through the science, technical engineering, mathematics subjects that eventually end up in your manufacturing sectors, which are more productive. When you look at our employment landscape in Zambia, majority of the people are either employed in wholesale and retail, which is basically informal, and the other group is basically in agriculture. So you have, I think, those taking up 25% each. And so this kind of provides a good opportunity. I think, firstly, looking at the change of government for Zambia, the regime, there's been a sort of a change in the foreign policy, and the government looking out to build more relationships and more partnerships with the West, the EU to be specific. So this provides, I think, a window of opportunity to come in and provide more and better support. We are already receiving support aligned to our national development goals, which are espoused in the 8th National Development Plan. But I think the changing shift from the government and the commitment towards the social sector, also, I think critical is improvements in the perception around corruption also, and the governance as well. And there's been a commitment towards decentralization. I think those basically provide opportunities and an entry point for the EU to sort of strengthen and enhance the sort of support that is provided to Zambia. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Balia. There are several points that resonate with me on your intervention. First of all, of course, understanding the political shifts in Zambia and in the country, and how does it affect its relations with the EU, as well as, of course, role of human development in the country's transition and strive to become a middle-income country. We are going to continue with our discussions, and first of them is Mr. Bogdan Stefanescu, who is a team leader in governance and social sectors at the EU delegation in Lusaka. He has been working for the European Commission for 14 years, both in headquarters and EU delegations in Africa, including also Uganda. And of course, he has also worked in Caribbean. He's been working on various fields, from agriculture and environment in Uganda to climate change, energy and disaster risk reductions in Caribbean. And now presently he works on social sectors and economic and political governance in Zambia. And he has been also a part of the EU's team of negotiators for climate change COPs. So please feel free to come in, Bogdan. And I would like to remind you, as well as Colin did in the chat, that the chat is open for questions and comments for all participants. Thank you. And please, Bogdan, take the floor.
Thank you very much, Katja. And I would like to thank Mr. Bolia for being so aware of our programs in the country, in Zambia, because my 5 minutes would have never allowed me to present them so well. So thank you very much. Otherwise, to begin with, I have to add as a disclaimer that I'm very new to working exclusively on human development and social sectors. Or maybe I should say that I've always worked on development and social sectors, but from different perspectives. For example, agriculture, climate change, environment, energy, infrastructure. But anyway, the optimistic approach to this kind of disclaimer is to say that there is always good to have a fresh pair of eyes to look into things. So looking from all these perspectives with my fresh eyes, I need to say that not only it's still important now to work on human development, but it's more important than ever. And I can quickly give two reasons. Many reasons have been given already, but two reasons. Both the polycrisis that was mentioned and the polyprogress, if I may coin the word, which is a technological, transport, digital communication progress, and so much more, that are presently undergoing, are deepening the inequalities between different segments of the population at all levels. And the second reason would be that different degrees of access to education, to health, to social protection services continue to sustain both vicious circles of poverty and virtuous circles of wealth, and therefore again to increase inequalities over time. So there is no place for sure to keep the guard down on human development. So with the right interventions, approaches and investments, the free education, the global health approach, the progress, and even the crisis can become factors to reduce these inequalities. What we need to sustain it's most of all, as Erika has said, a political leadership with a long-term vision that is people-centered, which makes me link to the first point that I would like to take a little bit further from today's discussion. This first point is that working on human development needs a strong commitment to a long-term vision, most of all for a coherent approach and for an adequate budgeting. Investing in human development is not at all a quick money maker like mining can be, or agriculture, and it requires a lot of patience for the return on investment. But at the end of the day, at local, national, and even global level, there is no more profitable return on investment than for human development, because it shapes the societies and prepares for what is next. It avails quality workforce for development of the economy. And even if we go more in detail, it decreases the huge expenses under the social protection schemes and so on. So long-term investments are very expensive, and it's almost impossible for public finance alone to sustain a steady and efficient human development path. So then, what to do? That's because from experience, it's very easy to leverage private finance from company for investment in agriculture. It's easy to use blended finance mechanism for investment in renewable energies. But for human development, this remains an almost impossible task. So it remains at the level of the governments to manage their long and very long investments, long-term investments in human development. And the arsenal of the government is not big. The sovereign loans remain a good source of finance for human development, but this is not the most sustainable way. And Mr. Boya knows, especially for countries like Zambia who have defaulted on their debt, it becomes very difficult. And if we can see a growing number of debt for nature swaps, there is almost never question of debt for human development swaps. So what to do? Another source of revenues, the fiscal solution requires a good public finance management and a fair taxation system, which we can hardly find in most of the partner countries. And in most of the cases, the availability of funds, even if achieved, does not translate in a fair distribution that makes justice to the human development chapters of the national budgets. A third solution would be the corporate social responsibility, be it through corporate philanthropy, social and development impact bonds, but these are also fairly inadequate to the real needs and need good regulation in order not to lead in some cases to corruption. And the bottom line here would be that international cooperation funds for human development can only come to partly complement and strengthen national allocation, but could never replace them. So what is most important is that government keeps the pace of financing human development. Still, I have to mention from an EU perspective that, and this has been mentioned also by almost everybody, that the Global Gateway comes to fill in a considerably gap in responsible investment in human development, even though underused until now, as Renato has mentioned, but it has an education and health pillar that give hope to finding more financial solutions, more innovative solutions for human development. And the second point I'd like to take further to this discussion is that working on human development that does need an integrated approach. When we talk about education, health, hygiene, can you still hear me? Because everything went black. Hygiene, nutrition, social protection are all sectors that cannot be dissociated from each other and are all branches of the human development. Just to give a few examples, malnutrition impairs the cognitive capacity and the health of learners. Good hygiene and availability of water improve health. Sanitation and hygiene facilities would keep girls in school after puberty, and social protection schemes allow for access to medical treatments and so on. They are always interlinked. So investing in this sector separately and the lack of coordination between the concerned policies and institutions will always only bear partial and short-term results, which is both inefficient and counterproductive. And this could be both a lesson for partner governments and for international partners. But of course, this is open to discussion, and this is what I'm doing here, opening the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanescu. I think there is a lot to discuss, because I already have several questions for you, but I did particularly appreciate that you bring in the long-term horizon of supporting human development and the fact that this is indeed it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And linked to that, I would like to invite our second discussant, Mr. Vitalis Mukhebi. Mr. Mukhebi, he's a national team coordinator at DSW Kenya, that is a German foundation for world population. He is a specialist in transformational development of young men and women and works in addressing the challenges of sexual and reproductive health and rights, gender equality, and economic empowerment of youth. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Vitalis, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katja. And first, congratulations for the well done study and also for this very engaging discussion. I believe you can hear me very well. Okay, so and thanks to all the other predecessors who have just spoken. There's lots of similarities even across the different countries, Zambia, for instance. But there are also peculiarities, peculiar elements within that. But I want to start by saying that my interest and focus on young people, again, is informed by where we are at as Kenya, as a country. It's a pretty youthful population. We usually joke and say over 70% of Kenyans are youth or young people. But then we are where I work with is a focus on the young people between the ages of 10 to 24 years. And we have seen quite a lot of effects of either the absence or concentration of human development on specific sectors. We've seen how they have affected the different outcomes of this population group. I want to start with what we are calling the geopolitical scene. That on that level, we are seeing a lot of focus for development, human development on the hard infrastructure. So there's even in the country as we move, you'll see a lot of constructions, road constructions, the trains, the newly built trains and railways. If we move a little bit, because Kenya is a bicameral governance country. There's national government and there's county government. If we go into the county governments, we'll see a lot of focus also on building infrastructure like hospitals themselves, the physical infrastructure of a hospital, but not the provision of services within it. There's common stockouts. There's no human resource to provide the service. There's a lot of missing elements that will actually connect or make it connect and provide the last mile of the services. So what do we end up with? The elements that we usually know, we used to know as the key strengths of the European Union, SRHR, gender equality, and such are missing out. We see that those ones coming, getting lost somewhere. Because now the focus, as we can see in the multiple indicator program, the focus is going into, let's say, the issues of green transition and digital economies, which is fine to an extent, but at the expense of the soft elements of human development, and that is costing the entire population that we are calling youth population, which is the future of the nation. We are seeing lots of teen pregnancies, for example, which is so high. The national average, yes, stands at 15%, but we have in the regions somewhere, some as high as 36%, dropping out of school, not completing their education. We have HIV as a huge problem, again, especially amongst the same youthful population. The rates of infections among that category, the teenagers, the adolescents, is so high. We are seeing also gender-based violence and sexual and gender-based violence also quite rife amongst the same population. So what is happening is, and forgive me if this is my theory, that competition at that global level, where now there is the West and there's the East. The East has been giving us this development priorities, loans for development, with no, let me use this phrase, with no strings attached to that. So there is a fund, go establish your railway line, or go set up a huge road from A to Z, which is fine. But the soft aspects disappear therein, and therefore some of our leaders would really like to go for such type of financing, as opposed to where there is a proper balance. You're saying, yes, build a road, but at the same time, let's have just systems, just taxation. When it comes to electoral values and governance, let them be fair and such like. So when there is there's no such like an approach, such like at a global level, then we see that the easier option for our top leadership is to go for the free, I would call it the free loans, or the ones that don't have the strings attached to them. Now, I want to come back a little bit and talk about the involvement of the civil society across developmental plans. The beauty of civil society, I being a member of this huge segment of the people, is that we
Vitalis? Looks like he lost his connection. Well, in that case, we can potentially go to some of the questions, and while we wait for him to come back. We have kept the chat open for any potential questions that you may have. So please use it so that our speakers will be able to answer to any of the questions or comments that you may have. But in the meantime, I was also thinking of the questions that we had based on your interventions. So for me, it's still like, I understand all your interventions. You bring in the need to support the human development and how human development is still crucial in this era of polycrisis and in this era of geopolitical change. But I was wondering, from your perspective, what should be done to make sure that human development sectors stay as a political priority in this context? So what is there to be done to ensure that this really happens and that human development does not fall behind other pressing topics? I would like to give a floor to our speakers to reflect on this a little bit. Perhaps starting for Ms. Gerritsen, if you may.
Thank you very much, Katja. Well, thanks a lot for the conversation and for the different interventions that have been made and were extremely useful and enlightening. And indeed, I mean, it's true that among people who work on human development, we all tend to say, well, we need to continue being engaged in human development and education or health. So each one of us wants to go for the sector. But I think that one of the points that Bogdan made, which is interesting, is really to see at the cross-sectoral dimension of things, and that none of the policies, especially being on climate, on, as I said, digital transformation, green transition, none of this will be made without a population that is properly trained and is healthy. So I believe that what can be done is to really extract this discussion from the specific group of already converted people, I would say, and make sure that when we talk about climate finance, we also talk about education in this context, climate education. We talk about digitalization, we talk about what kind of skills and education do you need to ensure that the digital transition will take place, etc. So that's first one thing, it is to bring this conversation outside of the circles of human development, already knowledgeable people and convinced people. Second thing is about the financing. Because here again, we are indeed in a context where, and because we moved from the MDGs to the SDGs, we moved from an area where health and education were really at the center of the policies to an area where all priorities are priorities in a way. And this brings to a sort of a competition of financing, which is pretty much unhealthy. But at the same time, policies need to be designed by sovereign governments together with their own societies. And that's why what's currently happening in Zambia is extremely encouraging, because we've seen indeed in Zambia a government that is taking this responsibility to bring the people to the right level of education and access to health in order for the population to thrive and to be able to develop and to thrive in the country and contribute to the development of the country with strong national policies, maintaining or putting debt back at the right level and securing national financing as well as support from the external from the external actors. So that's so the discussion about the financing is really key. And again here, when we talk about innovative financing, we should not shy away from thinking about innovative financing also for human development and not only for climate and digitalization. Since I mean, most important conversation about innovative financing is actually taking place in the environmental climate area. So here also probably some room for being a bit more innovative when it comes to human development financing. And last, as we are moving towards the end of, well, towards 2030, well, not yet the end, but to the summit this year and again next year, I think that here it needs to be demonstrated that human development is what we call macrocritical, that it is critical for the macroeconomic stability and for the long-term sustainability of economies to have well-educated and healthy people in your country, to have gender equality that also contributes to a longer-term to the longer-term sustainable development of countries, and this demonstration will again allow to have a conversation that goes beyond the converted circles of human development experts. So that's, I will leave it at this for now.
Thank you, Ms. Gerritsen. That's very interesting. In the meantime, we also had some questions in the chat from GIZ Brussels on concrete actions that the panelists see for the EU to cooperate more with local authorities and CSOs. So I would like to ask Bogdan to take the floor. You can also respond to my first question on how to keep human development as a priority. And of course, feel free to react also to what Erika has said.
Thank you very much. First of all, concerning your question, I think there is also, Erika has been quite exhaustive on providing possible solutions to that. But another solution could be linking up priorities, because yes, we have some clear priorities on the Green Deal and climate change. We have a priority on human development, but how do you link this up in order to use the same funds to finance both? Because frankly, I don't think that without a population there is any reason for us to fight against climate change or or the other way around. So if climate is going too far in these changes, what can you do in human development to save the day? You cannot do anything. So I think initiatives like One Health that bring together climate change and health, and other initiatives that, as it was said, bring education also and link it up to climate change. I think these are solutions that are pragmatic in order to use the finance in a sustainable way. As for the question on working with civil society, look, we have a situation in Zambia, as was said by Mr. Valia before, where the government is completely dedicated to human development. So what we have done, we have tried as much as possible to work with the government, through the government, and going to the possibility of having back the budget support since that we have dropped in 2015. So I think it's a very good way to support the government in its policies and in its initiatives and its vision of the Zambian population, for example. But in the same time, as EU, we will always have the CSOs as partners. We have special budget lines for CSOs. We have always the CSOs will be let's say a constant partner for us. We are not going to drop it in any case, because this is a part of what we do. Governments come and go. We can work with the government. We can have a partnership with the government. We can have no partnership with another government. So what we are going to do for human development, it will be through CSOs always.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your intervention. I would like to move on and get the comments from Mr. Valia. And in the interest of time, can you please keep your intervention in 1 to 2 minutes? Thank you. Looks like there is a technical problem on his side. So Vitalis, before you joined back in, I was asking the question on how to keep human development as a political priority in the era of polycrisis. And secondly, we were discussing on concrete actions that the panelists could see for the EU to cooperate more with local authorities and CSOs. So please take the floor, and in the interest of time, if you can keep your intervention in quite short, in 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you. All right, looks like Vitalis is not able to open his mic either. So this event is really drilled with technical problems. All right. Yeah, in that case, Mr. Traore, floor is yours. And indeed, if you can keep your intervention in 1 or 2 minutes.
Merci. Je voudrais parler de comment mieux répondre aux intérêts locaux et nationaux de la part de, bien sûr. Vous savez, je prends l'exemple sur l'intervention actuelle de l'Union européenne en Guinée, notamment l'intégrat pour la formation des immigrés retournés. C'est très bon, c'est un acquis majeur. Mais qu'est-ce qui a occasionné cette immigration? C'est parce que peut-être ça n'a pas marché à la base, donc à la racine. Donc, c'est mieux aujourd'hui pour que ces interventions puissent avoir des impacts dans le temps, que ces interventions soient à la source. Par exemple, s'occuper de l'éducation des jeunes, pas forcément des immigrés, mais des jeunes Guinéens qui sont là, qui vivent, qui sont là, qui ont abandonné les classes, qui sont dans la rue ou qui n'ont pas été scolarisés. Donc, quand nous avons des interventions comme ça, je pense même l'immigration va être minimisée. C'est un exemple que je donne. Donc, nous pensons que si effectivement l'Union européenne veut avoir des impacts dans l'OTAN, de s'aligner à la politique des nations, notamment en Guinée, la politique nationale de l'éducation, au niveau du ministère de l'enseignement technique, donc la politique nationale de l'enseignement technique, de l'emploi et de l'entrepreneuriat. Par exemple, notre ministère a changé de dénomination. C'est maintenant le ministère de l'enseignement technique, de la formation professionnelle et de l'emploi. Chez nous, il y a l'emploi, mais aussi nous avons une direction qui s'occupe de l'entrepreneuriat, j'allais dire. Il s'agit de l'agence guinéenne de la promotion de l'emploi et de l'entrepreneuriat. Donc, c'est une machine, c'est un outil très efficace pour faire face à d'éventuels problèmes d'immigration et autres. Donc, comme je n'ai pas assez de temps, je voudrais parler aujourd'hui, nous sommes en train de développer l'école nationale du numérique. La semaine-là, nous avons posé la première pierre du village numérique. Donc, c'est important que ce village numérique ait, par exemple, le soutien de l'Union européenne. Ce village numérique va transformer la Guinée du point de vue numérique. Elle en a parlé et je soutiens. Si nous parlons de développement humain, il faut parler aujourd'hui du numérique, il faut parler de la technologie, il faut parler de la formation. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Peut-être je peux réagir.
Yes, yes, of course.
Yes, Katia. Je vais réagir en français pour nos amis guinéens. Donc, merci beaucoup pour votre intervention. Et donc, comme vous le savez, dans chaque pays, l'Union européenne a un certain nombre de secteurs de priorité d'intervention. Dans le cadre de la Guinée, dans le domaine du développement humain, la priorité de l'Union européenne est donnée au secteur de l'accès à l'eau, puisqu'on a beaucoup parlé de santé, d'éducation, un peu moins de protection sociale, mais l'accès à l'eau fait partie également des secteurs importants pour le développement humain. Et c'est le secteur sur lequel l'Union européenne priorise ses interventions dans le cadre du programme multiannuel pour 2021-2024, ainsi que sur la transition et l'économie verte. Et enfin, comme troisième secteur de priorité, la démocratie, la gouvernance et effectivement la gestion de la migration. Donc, dans ce contexte-ci, et dans la mesure où effectivement il y a des projets intéressants qui semblent être en cours de développement en Guinée, j'entends ce village digital, etc. Ça peut être intéressant de se rapprocher de la délégation de l'Union européenne à Conakry pour avoir une conversation avec eux sur ce genre de projet et sur la façon dont on peut en effet intégrer une dimension formation, emploi et éducation à l'intérieur des secteurs de concentration et des éventuels projets qui pourraient être soutenus dans le cadre du Global Gateway. Voilà, j'espère que ceci a pu éclairer un petit peu la discussion. Merci beaucoup.
Many thanks for your response, Erica. Given our limited time, we are going to move to some closing remarks. Though this has been quite interesting conversation from my side, and I would like to thank all the panelists and all the discussants, as well as the participants for being here and for giving us your questions. I will give the floor to each of the participants for 1 minute to give us your main takeaways. And if you want to answer, take a small answer on the question from Helena Lambsdorff on how does European Commission work with governments that do not develop their policies and their frameworks together with societies. That would be also, of course, great if you can give your quick comments on that. I will start with the order, so I will start from Erica, if you can come to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katia. And well, thanks for the very interesting conversation. I think the report was already very interesting, and the conversation even more so. I was really delighted to hear from experiences from our partner country colleagues in Guinea, Zambia, and Kenya. It's always extremely interesting to have this kind of open exchange between us. When it comes to the maybe just very briefly the question from Helena Lambsdorff, when we work with governments that do not necessarily have their policies developed with their society, so as a whole of a inclusive process. Well, I mean, it depends really on the country context and the reasons why civil society has not been associated to the development of policies, but normally, indeed, we strongly encourage that governments, that we do within the EU as well as outside the EU, that governments work with civil society organizations to develop their national policies. And therefore it really depends on the country context. But second part of the question about the corruption. Corruption is obviously very important priority of our work as EU when working with partner countries. We tackle corruption using different types of tools and methods. One of them is that we work a lot on public finance management systems, and improving public financial management system on the whole cycle of public finances is essential, especially when talking about human development policies, which are sovereign policies mostly financed by national budgets. But we also tackle corruption by reinforcing civil society organizations, and their accountability role is extremely important to us, working with the judiciary as well, and reinforcing it whenever possible. But clearly corruption is something that we need to tackle, that governments need to tackle for the good of the populations. Too many individuals around the world suffer still from these acts of corruption, which are making them poorer and also more vulnerable. So I will stop here and thank ECDPM warmly for the report and for inviting the EU in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I will then give the floor to Mr. Trauche for final remarks, and may I kindly ask you to stick to 1 minute. Thank you.
Merci, madame. Je voudrais tout d'abord vous remercier pour cette invitation. Vous comprendrez que la Guinée est en transition et que nous avons effectivement besoin de penser au développement humain. C'est une situation de crise, donc la jeunesse a besoin d'être mieux encadrée. Et au-delà de ça, je retiens beaucoup de cette rencontre avec de bonnes idées, notamment des idées partagées et différentes, et qui vont nous permettre, nous ici, de mieux comprendre et de nous adapter aux différentes situations. Également, mes remerciements à Mme Erika de l'Union européenne. Et nous pensons qu'ils vont nous accompagner dans notre village numérique. Et elle va... C'est ça, c'est un grand bijou pour nous que nous voulons développer. Nous avons besoin de leur soutien, franchement. Et toujours à elle, nous avons besoin de nous investir dans le cadre du déploiement des enfants hors du système en Guinée. Nous avons besoin d'une politique, d'une stratégie et de projets concrets pour récupérer les enfants hors du système. C'est très important. Donc, je vous remercie beaucoup et je reste toujours disposé à travailler avec vous. Merci beaucoup. Ouais.
Merci à vous.
Thank you very much. At this stage, I would still like to see whether Ms. Valia is here or whether he can intervene.
Hi, Katja. Thanks. I hope you can get me. I
Yes.
was logged out for a bit. Yeah.
No worries, no worries.
Thank you for having me. I think it's been a very interesting conversation, learning about what the EU has been able to do in other countries and what we can do. Before I was logged out, I think there was one intervention I wanted to make on a question around how do we ensure that we keep human development prioritized or remaining at the center of a government's priority. One key thing that I've learned and one key thing that I would like to advance is especially on the financing. For example, in our country, Zambia, um, social sector funding or financing falls under what is known as non-discretionary expenditure, meaning whether or not the government chooses to spend money in this sector, there are no consequences. This is a bit different from other non-discretionary expenditure, such as salaries for public workers, where the government has a mandate to actually commit to these to this financing. I think part of ensuring that we prioritize human development is working with the government to legislate and find ways of ring fencing social sector funding. That's quite something that is quite critical for a country like Zambia to ensure that there are consequences and the government remains committed to funding or financing the human development sector. Then the other reaction would just be on what we need to do for the local government. In Zambia, local government financing since 2021 has increased by over 1,000% through what is known as the Constituency Development Fund as part of government's efforts to decentralize. There's still a lot that is required to be able to build systems and support the local authorities to develop the financial systems to ensure that they are able to handle this sort of resources in terms of the financing, but also be able to deliver in the human development. So, for example, delivery of healthcare, education is expected over time to eventually be devolved to the local authorities and move away from the central government. And I think this is an area that the EU can move in to help support the local authorities to build the systems that will be able to help them firstly manage the resources that they receive, but also deliver on these new functions that they have been given of advancing human development in Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you, Miselo. Then we move to Bogdan for final remarks. And if I may ask you to stick to 1 minute, please.
Yes. First of all, one of the key words that I find important here is partner. It's not donor, not competitor, not creditor, not antagonist. It's partner. So one of my main takeaways is a partnership of equals from this discussion. In a partnership of equals, we need to share the visions, share our values, and which I hope that for us will never be negotiable. And we need to be transparent about our interests. If we have those three conditions, we have the conditions for a partnership. We need to put clearly on the table these values, these visions, and these interests. And we need with the government to find a common denominator and find together solutions to go forward. But this is because our nature is to work with the governments as much as possible, but we cannot work directly everywhere and only with the government. So we have two other entry points to the partnership, which is through bottom up, through civil society organization, through organization of civil society organization. I think it's enough. And on the other side, from a global perspective, from agreements at international level that goes with commitments at international level, and getting the countries to get those commitments, like the SDGs, like the Paris Agreement, etc. So these three entry points, I think, are needed to have a proper partnership. And thank you very much also for this meeting and discussion.
Thank you. And finally, we have Mr. Vitalis Mukhebi, if you are still here. Yes. And can I also ask you to stick in 1 minute? Thank you. Seems like he is unfortunately not able to take the floor. In that case, I would like to thank all the participants, all the speakers for this event. It has given me great insights on how to keep human development in the agenda around in this context of polycrisis, and it has also brought up interesting conversations between different stakeholders. So thank you from my side, and I wish you a great afternoon.
Thank you, and the same. Goodbye.
Thank you, same. Thank you.